So I want to show you how to make shadows with your CG objects. You see right now there's no shadows being cast from the table or any of these other assets here. I know it's a very overcast day, so there really isn't many shadows, but perhaps you're using a scene that has more directional light, so you would want to have shadows. What we're going to be creating is basically called a shadow catcher. This exists in computer graphic programs as basically an invisible floor that catches shadows and is otherwise invisible. So we're going to set this up here for you right now. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to create some sort of floor, right? So I'm going to get, I guess, a plane, and I'm just going to zero this out. So it's on the floor, 0, and I'm going to scale it up so that it's encompasses all my objects. And look at that, as soon as I make a floor, now we see we have some shadows here. Now that's the first step. It's not as simple as just doing that, but this is the first step. So the next step is that we want to create a new layer down here. Create a new empty layer, and I'm going to call this floor. And I'm going to drag my floor, which is still called plane, into the floor layer. If I click this on and off, you see my floor disappear and come back. Now I want to add my floor to my foreground. So I'm going to click on foreground, go over into the details, and add the capture actor. I need to click the plus here again. Add the capture actor to 1 and pick floor. So now I should see the floor pops up on top of my video. So the next step is I need to create a new material for this floor. It's a very simple material. So I'm just going to go to add import material. I'll just call this m_floor. And I'm going to right click and just type constant and plug this into base color. And then I want to select this node and change this to a 1 so that it's white. 0 is black, white is 1. And click save. Then I'm going to close this window down, and I'm going to drag this material onto the floor. So I'm going to click plane, and right now it has a different material on it down here, but I'm going to drag the one we just made. It doesn't really look that different, but the setup is still important. All right, the next thing that we need to do is I need to make a sky. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make everything white, cover up all the video, so that when we render out our shadows, we have our shadows on pure white. That's going to allow us to create a matte so that we can remove them and make the white transparency, basically. So to make a sky, I'm going to drag in a sphere, and I'm going to change its position to 0, 0, 0. And then I'm going to scale it up so it fully encompasses my world. I don't know, maybe I'll just make this 100. Your numbers are going to be different because I don't know what the size of your world is. And you see it blocks out all the sun. So that's because the sphere, we're inside the sphere, it's casting a shadow. And also, we don't see it. We'll fix that. So while clicked on the sphere, I'm going to type in shadow here, and I'm going to turn off cast shadow. I don't want the sphere to cast a shadow. So now we're not blocking out the sun anymore. That's good. That's what we want. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to make a material for the sky. So I'm going to go to add import again, material. I'll call this m_sky. Double click it. Similar thing this time, add a constant, right click, constant. I also want to make this one 1, but this time I'm going to plug this into emissive. And also I want to make this material two-sided because we're inside the sphere right now, so we actually don't see anything because the paint is on the outside. We want the paint to be on the inside and the outside. So select the big node here and scroll down and pick two-sided, and then click Save. And you can close this window. Now we need to put the material on the sphere. So I'm going to click the sphere, and it has a material on it, but I'm going to change it. So I'm going to drag the sky one onto here, and then you should see it pop up. That's what we want. Now, there isn't, it's not popping up here in the comp yet because we need to add the sky to a layer. So I'm going to create another layer here, right click, create empty layer, call this one sky, drag the sphere in there so the sky is in there, and then I'm going to go up to my CG element for the foreground and add the sky layer to this as well. Click the plus, so now we have 3 of them. Click the drop down, sky. And now it pops up here in the preview. You see it's not very whited out. That's okay for right now. We'll fix that very soon. All right, so we want this to be white and white, but right now the sky's kind of gray. So there's a couple ways that we could go about changing this. We could change this to we could go back into our sky material and make the value brighter here. So instead of a 1, I changed it to a 10, and now look at that. It's pretty bright now, which is good. That's exactly what we want to have happen. So now we have the next step. So this is a little bit more complicated here. Basically, I need to create a CG element that is one with shadows and then one without shadows. And really the only difference is that the one without shadows doesn't have the floor, because without a floor, there's nothing for the shadows to fall onto. So they're essentially invisible. So I'm going to take this CG element here, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to duplicate it. Duplicate. And I'm going to rename one of these shadows. And no shadows. Now we're changing the names here, so my comp got broken. You know, it's no longer compositing. But that's okay. We are going to modify the material. But first we need to drop out the floor on the no shadows one. So click on no shadows, and we want to just change the layers so that it doesn't include the floor, exclude the floor. And check this out. So here we have shadows, and then the other one's no shadows. Shadows, no shadows. And that's going to allow us to extract that shadow. All right. So now we need to put it all together in the composite. We need to modify the material. So click on the comp up top and scroll to where the material is. It's in transform, compositing passes, transform passes, the green one here. Double click it. And we're going to need to modify this a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do this real quick, and then I'll come back and show you what I did. All right, so one more thing before I set up the material. You know how we created the shadows and the no shadows one? I also actually duplicated this 3 times. So we have an original FG one again. You could just duplicate it and call it FG again. And this one, the layers that it has is, this only has the foreground layers. So we want to exclude the floor. We want to exclude the sky. And so it only has, you know, the assets, not the white surfaces like no shadows and shadows has. So then we're creating that material. Remember, we clicked on comp, transform passes, the material down here, double click on it if you already have that open. So this material is more complicated than anything that we've worked with before. So rather than just the simple overnodes that we had before, now I have 4 different 2D texture parameters. So you can copy and paste those to get more of them. Remember, all of these nodes you can get by right-clicking and type them in. And I'll show you what all of these things are here. So this one is called FG. This one is called shadows. This one is called no shadows. And this one is the media one. Remember, these are 2D texture parameters. So 2D texture, or 2D texture parameter 2D. Texture sample parameter 2D is what they are. The names of them are names that you just make by clicking on them. You can change the name by clicking on the name here. The name is important, remember, because it needs to match this stuff. Then we need to set it up like is wired here. So I have a divide node, I have a power node. The power node is important because it has values that you can change. If you click on it, you can change the values here. That's how you can brighten up the floor. Right now you can see my floor is good. I have shadows here being cast and everything. But sometimes you might get like a little gray and it might not look as good. So you might have to change that power node's values. If you start to see a seam, Jesus, I have so many of these open. If you start to see a seam back here, then you need to adjust that power setting. You see the shadow on the ground there. That's good, that's what we want. The seam comes because that's where the edge of the floor actually is in the shot. So right about there where the floor ends and the sky begins. So let me go back to the material real quick. Then that plugs into a saturate node, plugs into the A of multiply. The B of the multiply plugs into the RGBA of media. RGBA of media also comes into the B of this overnode. The A of the overnode goes into multiply. This plugs into another overnode in the B, which plugs into emissive color. And the A of this overnode plugs back into the RGBA of the foreground. And then the shadows and the no shadows plug into the divide node. So I'll put this right here, pause your screen, take a look at it, set it up. After you set that up, you save it. Now when you click on the comp, you will see shadows on the ground, which is pretty cool. So if I render this out, I want to render the foreground out, and then I already rendered the foreground out, so I'm going to delete that from there. And then I'm going to render out shadows, drag that down here, and render that out the same way that we did before. I'll call this test 3 shadows. It's important to put things in different folders. I'm going to capture this, save it out. Let that render. And then I'm going to go back into After Effects and import that the same way that we did the other sequence. Import file, find, where's this, my desktop, test 3 no shadows, EXR sequence checkbox, good. Now I put the shadows here. You see it's white. So to fix that, I need to multiply this. So if you right click on the little toolbar up here and you go to columns, we want to make sure modes is on. Modes will let us change the blend mode. So for the shadows image sequence, we want to change this to multiply. Check that out. Now we got a shadow there. And I can also put a levels adjustment on the shadows layer, so I could brighten and darken that shadow, control it independently. The shadow fell on her leg there. You know, that's unfortunate because it doesn't look very realistic. I should have went in and adjusted my light in Unreal, but you know, you can do that. But this is the pipeline to get the shadows. And you know, we could adjust these settings and clean it up, and that would pretty much be it. I could also rotoscope her out so the shadow's not falling on her arm here, and then put her at the top of the layer stack so that, you know, the shadow's not falling on her. But there we go. We got shadows in Composure. Thus is the end of our pipeline.